Ever had a doctor be overwhelmed by your medical file and complex stew of medical conditions? Hello, my loves. This is Annette. My website is AnnetteLeonard.com, and you are watching or listening to Chronic Wellness, the podcast. Thanks for tuning in. So, I have been researching menopause because I am a woman of a certain age, and I don't feel like I've ever been given a clear and careful explanation of menopause, much less how menopause is going to coincide, interact with, impact, or change the multiple autoimmune diseases, illnesses, and pain syndromes that I am living with. And so I sought out a specialist, and that specialist walked into the room with a face that I have seen on other doctors who have taken the time to review my medical history before they come into the room. Now, not all docs do this, right? Some of them just blithely walk into the room and are like, hey, this is what I do. Tell me 3 things about you, or not. Maybe they just are, rolling with the confidence that they can lay down whatever truth and it's going to apply to you. But when doctors take the time to review a file before they come into the room, and their eyes look like maybe they have just walked in the room from a car accident or have seen some shit, and they immediately are kind of backtracking slash telling me that they're not going to be my specialist, kind of abdicating responsibility, wanting to make sure that I know that they're not going to take me on as a patient or going to manage my case file or going to dip their toe into the complex waters of handling. Like, I'm there to see an OBGYN. I do not think you are going to take on responsibility for my pulmonary issues. I don't think you're going to handle my nephrology or my neurology for that matter. Like, lady, I get that you are an OBG. That's what I came to you for. And I think it must be surprising when they think that they are just getting garden variety, female presenting patient who wants to talk about, like, I've had a few babies and I'm considering HRT. I am experiencing night sweats and I want to talk to you about what to do in menopause. Like, I get that you're not expecting files that can't fit into one file. I mean, I know they're not dealing with paper files anymore, but you get the point. Like, reams and reams of information that they hadn't even made time to read. And now they come into the room and they're like terrified about what they're going to find. And they're like, I'm not going to touch you with a 10-foot pole. And so what do we do as a patient in that moment? Do we just say, I guess I don't get to have this information because this specialist is too frightened to have me? I have done that before. In my earlier years of managing these illnesses, I have let their fear override my need, and I've left without the information that I needed. And that doesn't work for me anymore. And so I presently, right or wrong, now take the time to walk through their fears, like really to calm the doctor down, which is a wild position to be in as a patient. I think it's like advocacy 7.0, to be like, hey, simmer down. Like, yes, I have difficult to manage, entrenched, overlapping, complex, and confusing illnesses. I'm not asking you to weigh in on those things. I'm asking you questions about something you are an expert in. Like, why don't we start with just the three main hormones that I know the names of, progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone, why don't you tell me what they do in my body? Let's start there. I bet you know that information. Okay, now that you've explained that to me, given that my circumstance is I don't have a uterus and I am on blood thinners, let's talk realistically about whether any of those hormones are things you would consider replacing in my body. Why or why not? Like, let's talk about the areas that you are an expert in. And why don't you give me some of that knowledge? What have you seen about people with autoimmune disease going into menopause? Like, I bet I am not the first patient to walk through the door with autoimmune disease who's gone through menopause. Like, you know some things about this. Why don't you settle down and let's have a conversation about those? So what I'm saying to you is that I do think if you are committed, persistent, and willing to wade into the territory of being the guide of the conversation, there are ways to walk those ducks back from the ledge of like, I'm not going to be your doctor. When you are in a circumstance where a doctor walks into the room with those saucer eyes, afraid to consider even consulting with you as a patient because your medical history is so overwhelming and complex. If that is the course you want to take. Of course, you may not want to even talk to a doctor who feels that way. And the information on the other side might be valuable enough to stay committed to that cause. These are the things that we experience as complex patients. What similar experience have you had? What specialist walked into the room and was too scared to talk to you about the issue you were there to talk about? How did you get the information you needed? Did you get the information you needed? And knowing that I will next be talking about menopause, are there any of you who have dealt with menopause and your complex conditions? How has it affected you? How did you get good information? Did you get good information? These are the kinds of things I will be wading into next. So of course, if you have questions, if you have comments, if you have issues you'd like me to discuss, sound off. As ever, I want to hear from you. And thanks for sharing a few minutes here today. Until we're together again, I thank you and be well.